Welcome, I am Rachel with Restorations by Rachel, and this week I will be working on this beautiful Drexel Heppel white dresser. Now, it is a bit beat up. It's seen lots of wear from the years, but I am excited for the vision I have for it. Spoiler alert, it will be partially painted, so if that makes you mad, I'm sorry. I have restored, I know at least one piece to fully stained, but I just think these look beautiful fully painted, fully restored, or if you do some type of combo. So my plan is a combo, a stain and paint combo. I think it's going to look really pretty, so if painted pieces maybe make you upset, I hope you still stick around to see what I do with it. But I'm excited to give this beauty some new life and hopefully lots more years in someone's home. So let's get going. So my first plan of action is I'm going to get the stripper on top of this because, again, I want to stain the top. But I'm going to pull these drawers out just so that the stripper doesn't possibly drip on there. And I can remove the hardware and clean everything while the stripper is working. And be vacuuming the inside and out some because it's kind of gross. All right. Let's get going on stripping this thing. I'm using Green Easy Stripper. It's worked well for me in the past. If I'm working on vertical surfaces, it is a bit drippy for that. It still works, but not as ideal. But I just pour a generous amount on here and spread it around. I can always add more. And I like to keep, I got this metal container from a thrift store or something. Garage sale. I can't quite remember, but I saw Jennifer from Safe by Design do that, and I just kind of if I want to pour my stripper in there, if I'm working on vertical surfaces, it's nice, and then I just keep my brushes in there. Really, I should just keep one in there. I was kind of surprised to find two more, but that way I'm just not wasting a brush on each stain or each piece that I strip. So, be a little bit nicer to the environment, save the money, that kind of thing. Now the work time on here, I think it says 4 hours. I've never had it take that long to actually work. Honestly, I've found within about an hour, it's good to start stripping off the finish. Some people prefer not to wait that long. Clean Strip has a really great stripper that's going to work super fast, but I like to avoid the chemicals if I can, so this is a much better option. This does have still a little bit of a smell to it. My oldest daughter affectionately calls it rotten candy. I don't think it's that bad, but it's at least a much safer stripper to use than the Clean Strip, and I'm not going to have to worry about my kids being around the fumes like I would with Clean Strip. Even though I'm out in my garage like that, it lingers, and I just don't want myself or my family around it. Now, while the stripper does its thing, I'm going to remove the hardware and get to cleaning. I have a baggie that I'll keep the hardware in. I might actually keep the rusty ones separate so they don't ruin the rest, and I have to try to save all of them. So I am going to try to save these. I'm hoping I can. Before I get going on all my cleaning, I'm going to glue this little strip of veneer down that is coming loose. I bought these little needles. I think they're specifically for getting into tight spots. I can't remember. It's been a while, but it's a great little syringe kit. It helps you get under these little spots. You can just fill it up with wood glue. I'm honestly reusing it from a previous time. I was hoping if I just let the glue dry on the tip that it would be fine. I could just pop off the dried glue and then use the old needle tip, but that didn't work. I'll probably just rinse this one out this time so I don't lose the needle, but I know it's worked for others. So I've got a good amount in there. I'm gonna kind of push it down. I'm gonna get a paper towel to wipe back the excess. I got a damp paper towel. Really that, and then I just have this little simple little clamp that I'm going to use to pinch that down. I'll let it like sit there for a good hour, and then I'll clean this side. All right, now it's time to clean these dirty areas that I'm going to want to sand down to prep for primer. I'm using Simple Green cleaner. You could use Dawn, basically whatever. And I love these little scrub brushes. I attach it to my my drill. And whoop! And go to town. That first spin, it always gets you. Wow, you can tell how much the finish is coming off. I mean, there might be dirt too, but to me, with that clouding up, the finish isn't good anymore. Yeah. I might have to sand that back a little bit more in some places, since the finish is failing. But I'm sure it will sand off pretty easily. Okay. It's been an hour and a half. It's been plenty of time for this. I could have probably worked on this a little bit earlier, but had to go inside and do some quarterly tax work, which is really fun. But that's done. So I'm just going to get to stripping. And I will hold on to a box, just like these small boxes, these size, like 1 or 2. So I have them. They're nice, in my opinion, for discarding stripping residue. I've also seen people just line small buckets or boxes with grocery sacks, plastic grocery sacks. So, lots of options. Once I'm finished scraping the surface, I like to wipe it down with paper towels first, and then I'm going in with Green Easy's cleaner to wipe off all the stripper residue that I can. There are a couple areas of stubborn stains, so I also use the cleaner there by spraying it on there and then scraping it with my scraper, and that helped remove it. Now, I will give this plenty of time to dry before I start sanding, but as you can see, there are a lot of nicks and dings. Still several scratches. I'm hoping those will sand out, but if not, I have a method that can help with that. And so now I'm going to get to prepping all the drawers and the sides. Since the drawer fronts are curved, I'm using this squishy interface pad to put on my orbital sander, and then you just put your sanding disc on top, and that helps the sander conform more to the surface as it curves, and it's just a bit gentler as you sand. My sander is also adjustable speed, and I like to start at a little bit of a lower speed and just see like how the finish is sanding before I speed it up, because I just don't want to gouge any of these areas since the orbital sander can be pretty aggressive. I'm also going to give the sides and tops a good sanding, because as I paint, I'm going to be adding a little extra width and height, and I want the drawers to still close well when I'm finished. All right, it's the next day, and I'm starting with an 80 grit for sanding the top. You'll see me pause here in a minute and take off the sanding disc, add a new one, because it was just kind of clogging up, which I thought was really strange. But later I realized that I don't think it was completely dry, even though it had been a good 14, 16 hours between when I had removed the stripper and, finished all my cleaning. And then after the 80 grit, I went up to a 120 grit and stopped there for a bit. So after the 120 grit, that scratch is looking a whole lot better. There are still some dings, and then these little spots. It's gotten dark outside, so my lighting's not as great. I feel like it's the old stain kind of lifting up or seeping through, or maybe it's a little bit of the stripper residue. So I'm going to go over this with acetone after I'm finished sanding with the 120, just to See if that help takes it up. I went back over it again with 120, and then this time along the edges I hand sanded just to be careful around that veneer because it can be a bit thin. And then it was time to reassess. It is looking so much better. That scratch is basically not there. I'm thinking about using a dark gel stain to stain it, mainly because it will blend better with this front veneer, and then the side there, just it's going to be a little bit different than the mahogany veneer, and so it will blend better. And I've used a dark gel stain on a piece like this before, and it looks really good. My only issue, as you can see, is there's just still, it's like almost the, you know, they call it bleed through. I don't know, the natural coloring dye of the wood will kind of seep through. That will especially happen if you are painting. I feel like that's what's happening here. So I'm gonna have to research that a bit, see if that's gonna be an issue as I stain. In the meanwhile, I'm going to fill this little gouge in the top. I'm using this Quickwood. It's a 2-part epoxy. You can see the dark and the light. You just cut off what you need, mix that up, and then apply. And then I always like to put it back in the tube and then put that inside a plastic baggie, and you can reuse it several times. While that dries, I'm taking care of the rest of the sanding that I need to do. For the front curved areas, I'm using the squishy foam interface pad again, and with 120 grit to get off that remaining stain, since I'm going to stain it again. Now I'm attempting to get these spots with acetone. If it's stripper residue, this will usually help clean that up. It's worked for me in the past, at least, if I've had any of the Green Easy residue still around, and especially if I've painted, then the paint won't adhere. But obviously I'm staining in this instance, but just trying to figure out what's going on here. I have sped this up quite a bit so you can see how it looks as it evaporates, and it does help some, but the spots are still lingering, so I'm gonna just continue to work on it and brainstorm and just see if the spots come back. Okay, let's take this off, see how it's doing. Looks like you got a friend in the process. Yeah. I don't know why that's on my hand. Okay. Maybe a little buckled here, but I can just fill that in and smooth it out. So, it's great. For the curved areas, I'm using the squishy Pro Foam pad on my Surf Prep sander. I'm using their medium grit. This dresser, as you can see, has lots of dings, and so I'm having to sand it a little bit more in depth as I prep it for paint, trying to smooth out a lot of these dings, especially along these contoured areas on the front. It took a pretty good beating. And again, the finish is failing, so I'm having to sand a bit more aggressive there, because when I put my primer and paint on here, I don't want that old finish chipping and flaking off. I want it to be a good surface to accept the paint. So I have this part of the leg that is wanting to come off, which is certainly not ideal. So I'm going to use my little glue syringe again, try to get some glue down in there, and then I'll clamp it down to help secure it. Once that was dry, I removed the clamp, and now I'm going to fill in some of the cracks and just areas that need a little bit of Bondo. This is by JB Weld, but it's basically the same as Bondo. It's 2-part epoxy that you mix together and apply, and it dries super fast, and you can smooth it out, sand it down, just to shape it how you want. There were some areas on those contoured edges that I wanted to make sure I really got in those crevices because I've been burned before, my primer not sticking. So I am hand sanding there. I have a contour sanding kit that I use. I use this piece in there a lot. It's nice for getting in those tight spots, and it also has some other attachments you can use that are helpful. Now the top was still giving me issues. You can see those spots have poked up again. I've just decided to cover up the top and wait it out and go ahead and paint the base. I did ask for help in my stories on Instagram, and I got a mixture of responses of what they thought it was. Some said maybe it's still wet and just wait it out, give it time to dry, and then sand it again. Others said that it looked like tannin bleed through. So again, I just wanted to cover it up and deal with it another day, give it a couple more days to dry, take care of the rest of my sanding and prep that I need to do on the base for paint, and then get some primer and paint on there and check back in with the top later. After giving it a good vacuum, I also went over it with just some old t-shirts I keep on hand, and that will get off the last bit of that sanding dust before it's time to prime. For my primer, I'm using Sherwin-Williams Gallery Series primer, and y'all, I have to tell you, I love it. It is not too thick, but it still has great coverage. I did not have to dilute this at all. I also asked them to tint it so it's gray. Doing that because I'm going to use a darker color, and right now you can see me doing my test sprays until I'm happy with the spray pattern. I'm using my Earl X 5700 sprayer. I've had this for a few months now and have really enjoyed having it. It is a bit heavier than my other Wagner sprayers because of the metal parts, but I found that it works really well. So I'm a big fan of it, but the others that I've used before are also good sprayers. I was just wanting to upgrade mine a bit. You can see I'm going slowly to get good coverage. I'm also overlapping by 50%. That's going to help get you a good amount of paint on there, but again, at the same time, not too much. You want to avoid any drips if at all possible. In this Gallery Series paint, it dries really quickly, but it also levels really well as it dries. So last night we had some storms come through and we were moving furniture around so we could get our cars in here, and this other corner did the same thing as that corner that I've already showed you that I repaired. So I have moved it off of the little roller wheels I had it on originally. I think it was putting pressure on these corners, and with it being so old, it just, snapped off. So I've glued that back. I'm going to have to do the same thing with Bondoing. There's a little areas here too that the primer didn't stick very well, so I'm going to sand that, get that good and scuffed up for the second coat of primer, and then I'm going to go through with glazing putty, this stuff, to fill in any little spots that I feel like need to be filled in, and then I will do a light sanding to smooth it out and put a second coat of primer on here. I'm really curious to see how this primer does with covering bleed through, because it's, it claims to do that. I am going with a darker color, so I'll have some safeguards already in place with that, but I'm curious to see how it looks after the second coat. Adding Bondo on those cracks was a pretty quick process, and then while those dried, I fixed the other areas. Just sometimes on these little ledges, it's hard to truly get your sandpaper and roughen up those spots. So sometimes I'll miss it, but I always make sure I check it. And so I'm just using a sanding sponge to try to really press down in there and scratch it up, so when I apply primer my second round, that it will stick. And then it's time to sand back everything really well so I can get that second coat of primer on. I'm sorry the focus isn't very good on this shot for some reason, but I'm just doing my same process, putting a good layer on there and overlapping 50% as I go. Here it is a couple hours later, and as a whole, it covered it pretty well. You can still see, especially on that drawer, and then my lighting's not that great. I saw more spots popping through over here. Oh yeah, that's picking it up. So it'd be interesting to see what it would look like after a third coat. I'm not going to experiment with it because I'm not going light, but I don't know, it seemed to be working pretty decent. It covers a lot better on the second coat, but I'm going to get going with paint now. The paint color I've chosen is Vagabond Blue by Melange Paints. This is a really beautiful navy blue. I have not personally used it yet, but I've seen it used on some other pieces, and I think navy looks really pretty on the curves of these Heppel white dressers, so that's what I'm going with, and I'm hoping it's going to look good as I imagine. I feel like this paint always gives really great coverage. You can see how well it's going on, and I'll show you a close-up here in a bit, but it often just needs a couple of coats of paint to get full coverage. You can see here it's gone on really well. There's a little spot there on a drawer front, but it's not bad at all, and this will level out really nicely as it dries, and then I'll do a light sand where needed and get the second coat on. I completely forgot to hit record, but here it is after the second coat. It's still wet. It's looking good. I think there are some areas, just hard for my sprayer to get like right there. I think is still needs to get some paint, but I can fix that pretty easily. But it's looking good. Hopefully it dries really nice. So for this area, rather than just trying to spray it a million times, I'm gonna come in and just hand paint it with a little brush, and then I'm gonna go back over and spray it, because the problem is when you hand paint versus spray, it just ends up looking different, unfortunately. Something, I guess, just with all the paint particles go on, but I'm just gonna go over and spray it while it's still wet. And we should hopefully be fine. And I'll just spray like this top section. Now that I'm happy with the paint, it is time to tackle the top. I'm using denatured alcohol. Several people suggested it on helping just maybe clear up those spots that are still there on top. So I'm giving it a good rub down all over. And this stuff thankfully dries pretty quickly, so I could assess pretty quickly after that. So I actually feel like it's a little bit better, but it's still there. And I need to sand here anyways. So I'm gonna sand all over, see how it looks after that. You hear my boys playing in the background. And then we'll just kind of see. Might be doing that seal coat after all. I'm sanding all over with 180 grit, and then I'm giving it a really good vacuum to get off all that dust before then sanding it with 220. After sanding with the 220 grit, it looks really good. Do have one slight problem. I basically started sanding through the veneer right there. That was when I was using the 220. I realized it like right at the last second, which I kind of can't believe I did it. But I'm thinking the gel stain will be okay. If necessary, I can kind of draw in some grain there if it's not looking good. But I'm going to give it some time. I'm going to work on the drawers because they're kind of dirty, need to be cleaned up and sanded. And we'll just see how this grain does. Hopefully those spots will stay at bay, but we'll see. For the drawers, I'm using acetone to clean up some areas where there's some marks. And if that doesn't work, I'll come in and sand those spots. And then for the rest of the drawers, I'm using some soapy water to give it some good cleaning. Well, great news on the dresser top. It is looking so good. So I'm going to get to go ahead with staining it. I'm using a gel stain, which is oil-based, so I'm going to do a slip coat with mineral spirits. It helps, just have a little bit of a barrier between the wood and the stain, and gives you a little bit more time to work. And it also is going to help clean off that last bit of sanding dust that's on there. You can see my towel is picking up some of that as I wipe on there. Now, as I was doing that, I realized, oh my goodness, I have not protected the base. I don't want to drip any stain on there. So I'm just getting out this brown craft paper that I have on hand, and I'm taping it around the body. I'm using a frog tape. It's for sensitive surfaces, so anything that's freshly painted. I started using that lately. I got it on sale at Sherwin-Williams, actually. Sometimes they'll run good sales on their paint supplies, so keep a lookout if you want to use it. But I've really liked it, and it's not peeled paint off at all on me, so I feel a lot more confident putting tape on surfaces now.
For the stain, I'm using Varathane Gel Stain in the color Kona. This is, as you can see, a really deep, dark color. It's my first time to use it, and I have to tell you, I really like it. A couple of y'all suggested it, so shout out to Melissa and Nana Gigi for suggesting this after I said I had trouble with just how thick Minwax's gel stain is with wiping it back. So as you can see, this consistency is quite runny, and it goes on there quite easily and wiped off well for me. On the can, it says to rub it in all directions, so that's why I'm doing that. And then when you go to wipe back, you want to make sure you just wipe in the direction of the grain. It has several minutes of open work time, so I was able to get the top completely covered in the stain before wiping back. The temperature is also really moderate right now, like 60s, low 70s, so that also allowed me to have a little bit longer work time. But if it's warmer, I have to work in sections, but it shouldn't be too much of a problem. Once I feel like I have all the excess wipes back, I will then make one last pass with my rag and go completely from left to right and do it really lightly, get back the last little bit if there is any on there. While I'm waiting on the stain to dry, I'm going to go ahead and paint the edges of the drawers. I typically just need to do 2 coats, but sometimes I'll need to do a third. So the stain should be good and dry now. It's been like 2.5 hours. It's a nice dry day. I went over this with a tack cloth, and now I'm just going to use this wipe-on poly to seal it. I'll do 3 to 4 coats of it. I've used this wipe-on poly before with great success, but you will see that quickly here I realized that there's a problem. If you notice, after I make a few wipes with my rag, that there is stain on there. It takes me a little bit to finally realize, but basically I'm putting this on too early. It's not dry, and whatever mineral spirits that is in the wipe-on poly is bringing up the stain.
Is it taking? Oh no. Oh no. So basically you start panicking, deciding to just keep going, thinking, well, maybe if the entire top is messed up, then it could be easier to fix that way. I don't know if this was the best decision, but I did it. While I waited for it to dry, I went on to cleaning the hardware. Remember that several of these pieces were pretty rusted, and so I first simmered them in a pot with vinegar and water. It's about 25% vinegar to 75% water. That will help just kind of get the rust to come off, get all the dirt and contaminants to be easier to clean off. And then I'm using quadruple zero steel wool and Barkeeper's Friend to clean up the rest of it. While I got the hardware clean, they didn't look particularly good, so I'm using this gold spray paint that I love and have used on a lot of pieces to give them a pretty gold color. I am not spraying them flat just because of how the pool is. I feel like it's hard sometimes for it to not make little marks or ridges on the back part of the plate. So I'll hold it like this and spray it, and it dries pretty quickly, and that way I can get all the little areas around the handle and then let it dry for just a bit and then set it down to dry the rest of the way. Well, here what it looks like in its sad state after it dried. Crazy blotchy. I'm going to see just if I can put another coat over this and fix it, because my concern is if I have to like strip or sand it down is where the veneer is already too thin over here. Like, I can't sand it. So I don't know. If it doesn't work, I think I will try maybe just taking it off with like acetone or mineral spirit, something like that, and at least getting most of it off. It might still be in the grain, but I think it should hopefully be fine, like okay enough to then put stain on again. So I don't know, we'll see if we have to do that, but that's my thought process. Really hoping I can keep this stained because I thought it looked so good before this. Well, I tried it, but spoiler alert, it did not work.
look at this, how streaky it was. So I pivoted and tried another plan. So the next plan was to try mineral spirits to hopefully cut the stain some or strip it some, but that didn't work at all. So I wiped all that back and then came in and tried acetone. That didn't work. And so now it's time for, I guess, plan D at this point, and it's to strip it. I'm not going to use the same stripper. This time I'm going to use Smart Strip. It's another safer stripper to use. It has a longer work time. So I'm going to add that, go through my same process, letting it sit, scraping it off, cleaning off the residue, and then I'm going to go in and hand sand since I've already burned through the veneer in several areas. And I'm also not worried about like completely sanding all of that finish off. I'm just trying to get to a uniform base so I can hopefully reapply the gel stain. After I was happy with it, I then cleaned it up with mineral spirits and then came in with the gel stain and crossed my fingers. And look at it, y'all. It worked. It is so beautiful, and goodness, am I relieved and just so grateful. I decided to play it safe with my top coat and wait a couple of days and use a water-based top coat. So I am switching to working on the drawers. Lining drawers like this is pretty tedious. I wouldn't say it's necessarily hard, but it takes a while. You have the curved front, you're having to line up a pattern because the drawer is so deep and wide. So it takes some time. I did go into a little bit more in depth with how my process is in a reel, and I can link it in the description, but this at least gave you a quick idea of the process. Okay guys, it has been a full 48 hours plus some, and I'm going to use a water-based top coat on here. I have it all protected because I don't want any of the overspray from it to get on my paint. I'm not planning on top coating it since this paint has a top coat built in already. I plan to do at least 3 coats. I will not probably sand after the first one, just to make sure if I happen to, lightly sand it, that it didn't go through onto the finish. It's worked well for me doing that process, so I will for sure do a light sanding after the second coat, and we'll see how it is after 3 coats. For this first round, I'm trying to be especially careful, get off any specks of dust that might be on there, so I'm going over it with a tack cloth. I hate the feel this leaves on your hands, but it's a necessary evil. For my top coat, I'm using Minwax polyacrylic in a satin finish. I felt like satin would give it a nice sheen, and the paint is also in a satin finish, so they kind of match one another. I am giving it I would consider a light spray, but still giving it a thorough coat and overlapping by 50% as I go. Before bed that night, I was able to get in a quick second coat of top coat. You can see I'm rocking my Turby Twist. I love these things for after you shower, put your hair up in. So if you're lady interested in that, it's so much easier than just a big towel. Between my second and third coat, I want to make sure that it's really smooth for that final coat. I'm using a 400 to 600 grit. I'm not sure really what ends up being. I would say somewhere in the middle to the higher grit of my Surf Prep sanding pad. I just like these for doing a quick little hand sand, but get all over the surface, get back any nubs, and just make sure it's really smooth as I put my hand over it, and then do a good vacuum and wipe down before putting on my third and final coat. Now, before I give you the final reveal, let's go back down memory lane just to remember how it was when it started. Great bones, but lots of wear, failing finish, damage on the top, repair on the side that I needed to make. The hardware was rusted and it needed a refresh, but after lots of love, here it is now. What do you think? I, of course, love it. I feel like the one word for it would be elegant. I love these dark colors together. I think the blue really looks pretty against the gold hardware. I love the way the light reflects off the curves of the front. I think that's one of the reasons I'm such a sucker for these Heppel white dressers. They are just so pretty with their curves and their details. That top, I'm so grateful I was able to save it and still stain it. The gel stain covered up those areas that I burned through the veneer a bit, thankfully, and it just all came together just like I had hoped. Always love hearing from y'all what y'all thought about this video, the design choice I did. If you learned anything, I would love to connect with y'all in the comments. As always, I appreciate you watching and look forward to catching you on the next flip.